Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Death of Death podcast, where we proclaim Christ's victory over sin, death, and everything else. I am your host, as always, Nick Stewart. Getting this episode done a little early because my wife and I are making a trip to California for her birthday, so we should actually be there when this one drops. So I'm doing a slightly shorter podcast today, just some things I've been thinking about. Just thought they would be helpful for, anyone who's alive in the world today, I hope. I'm trying to think about the things that happened to me and try to see God's work in all of it. This might not be like a fully fleshed out thought that I'm, kind of sharing with you today, so I'm just kind of going with this and seeing where it goes. But, we can look at an unfortunate circumstance and just say, well, stuff happens. But we can also look at an event or a situation and say, what is God doing in this? And, we can't always know what he's doing in it, but we can try to orient our thinking more in line with the truths of Scripture, and we can accept his sovereignty over everything. So we need to change our thinking about the things that happen to us in general. I've been thinking about this just because of a few things that have happened to me lately. And, it would be good for all of us to align our thinking with the sovereignty of God. God is sovereign over all things, both good and bad. So let's talk about both of those things. Let's talk about the good and let's talk about the bad. Bad things happen. We all know that. There's no really denying that fact. People die, you spill fresh coffee on your hand and you burn yourself. And those are equal in my mind. Is it any comfort to us that God is in charge of those things? It isn't always, but it should be. Because even if something bad happens, it comes from the hand of a good God. The God who is the very definition of good. When we reflect on the fact that even the bad things that happen to us come from a good God who knows everything, and therefore knows what's best. And if he works all things to the good of those who love him, we should not dwell on the bad, but on the good that God is doing in it. Because there's always good to every situation, even if we can't see it. And I'm careful to make that distinction, even if we don't see it, because if we can't see the good in a situation, the temptation is to say that there is none. And maybe practically that's true. Maybe if there is no practical good for us, then, there might as well not be any. But if God is good and everything he does is good and he works all things for the good of those who love him, then there is good in every situation. Just because we can't see it or define it or point directly to it, that doesn't mean it isn't there. So although we should try to look for the good, and I don't even think it's wrong to speculate about the good as long as you don't, make a hard statement that you know what God is doing, we can rest in the fact that, it's there whether we can see it or not. Genesis 50 is kind of the go-to passage for this. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, and that was evil, and that was a bad thing that happened to Joseph, and, it just wasn't a good situation, but it says that Joseph's brothers did that, and in almost the same, paragraph, it says that God sent Joseph to Egypt, and Joseph says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. So, there was probably a long time where Joseph was not seeing the good in that situation, but it came, and, he would have been wrong at the time to say this is a bad situation with no good in it at all. And it might take our entire lifetimes to figure that out, but it doesn't mean that the good isn't there. I was sick last weekend, and that's not a huge deal, of course, but I was supposed to lead worship at my church that Sunday. And I was holding on till the last minute, hoping that I would get better or be able to push through it. And I was going to. I was just going to go and, just do whatever I could. But then on Saturday, my voice started to go. And that's the one thing that you just can't get around, even if you are sick. Like, you can fake being mentally there. you can fake, you can blow your nose and probably get a good 30 minutes of singing before your congestion comes back, but once your voice starts to go, there's no faking that. There's no getting around that, and I had to tap out, and that was not a good thing in and of itself. It was unfortunate that I lost the privilege of leading the church in song, and I inconvenienced my friend Jordan because he had to fill in for me last minute when he had specifically requested that Sunday off. And those weren't, necessarily good things, but, does that mean that there was no good in the situation that God had brought about? And we obviously know the answer is yes, there was good. The things that happen to us always have a mixture of good and bad. Now we can choose to dwell only on the bad, or we can look at the big picture. And we don't have the full picture, mind you, because only God knows everything. But we can have a bigger picture than just what's right in front of us. Just the negative side to things. Before I got sick, I was sleeping about 4 to 5 hours a night and constantly working. I've been driving Lyft to make extra money. I've been training for my barber test with a local school. I've been trying to keep up with the podcast work. My wife and I got a new cat. And, there's just regular household work I need to keep up with. And not to mention the fact that I've been fighting to keep my daily Bible reading on track. I could probably, list a few other things if I had time to think about it. I was pretty much doing something every moment I was awake, and I was, not really sleeping. And I never really ran out of things to do. And I'm actually starting to question whether one could ever be done with everything they need to do. And when God made me sick, and, make no mistake, 1 Samuel 2 says that God makes sick and he makes well. God made me sick, and I literally had no option but to get some sleep, to take time off from school, to take a break from driving Lyft. I actually got up at my usual time in the morning, and my body just rejected it like a baboon heart. I was practically falling asleep standing in my kitchen while I was pouring coffee. I couldn't stay awake. I had no option, so I had to go back to sleep. Couldn't go to school, couldn't drive. I needed rest, and God forced me to take that rest. It made me realize that you can't just keep pounding away at your to-do list until there's nothing left on it. It's just not going to happen. You have to take time for rest or leisure. You might even exhaust yourself to the point where you make yourself sick and then nothing's getting done, God obviously placed a value on rest in creation when he rested on the seventh day, and that same day became a day of rest for his covenant people when he rescued them from slavery in Egypt. God knows we need rest, so he's made a perfect system to give it to us. 6 days of work and a day off. Researchers are actually finding that 6 days of work and 1 day of rest is actually the perfect routine for people to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And it's being popularized now as the 24/6 lifestyle. But, God obviously gave us that blueprint a long, long time ago. So getting sick was not a good situation, but it brought good about in my life. And it was God's way of addressing some deficiencies in how I was using my time. And just after I had recovered from my cold, I was back to work and back into some kind of a routine. I got into a car accident. And it was a minor one. Nobody got hurt. I know you don't care, but, I just wanted to say that up front. No, it wasn't a very bad car accident at all, but it could have been really, really bad. It was not a great situation, as you can imagine. And I think for legal reasons, I can't really talk about the details. Maybe someday you will know those details, and I'll be able to share with you just how bad that could have been, because it's almost comical, but once again, we have the choice to dwell on the bad things, or we can look at the big picture, which includes both good and bad. And, there was plenty of bad to dwell on. The damage to my wife's car, being an hour and a half late to pick her up from work, And of course, the complicated nature of dealing with insurance companies. Those are all bad things, But we can look at the big picture. God protected me and the other driver from getting really hurt. And again, I'm not going to share the details, but it could have been 10 times worse than it was, And also, my wife's car could have been way more damaged than it was. Like, if I told you what happened and then you saw the car with just one broken window and a scrape on the side, you would not believe that what I told you happened actually happened. Let's put it that way. God is once again forcing me to take a break from things. I can't drive Lyft until I get the car fixed. Now, it's a bad thing and a good thing. Of course, I won't be making as much money in the meantime, and God obviously calls us to work and support our families. But it will force me to take a break from that to focus on some other really important things, like barbering, to get my license, and, the podcast, which does make me some money. And, and besides, like, the car will not be damaged forever, And it also forces me to reckon with the fact that I made decisions that led to that accident. And that's not an admission of guilt in the collision, by the way. That was 150% the other driver's fault. But of course, I shouldn't be talking about that yet. Can't wait until I have a legal clearance to just tell the whole story. As if anyone besides me cares about that story. But I made some fateful decisions throughout the day that put me in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that much is definitely true. Same as the other driver. We even talked a little bit about the fateful decisions that led us to that point. I was actually doing haircuts at my pastor's house, him and his 2 sons, and I had to postpone the last haircut, his son Duke. I had to postpone it because I was running late to pick my wife up from work. And if I had just stayed and done the last cut and just been a little bit late to get my wife, I wouldn't have been in the wrong place at the wrong time and gotten in that wreck. But of course, in that moment, stopping early and getting my wife seemed like the absolute best choice to make. My pastor even supported that choice. And I probably wouldn't have done it any other way in any other circumstance. And in addition to that, if I hadn't been late to my pastor's house in the first place, I would have been finished with all the cuts earlier. And once again, not been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if I just scheduled the haircuts on a less busy day or earlier in the day, you got it. You're starting to catch on. I wouldn't have gotten in that accident. There were plenty of practical decisions, better decisions I could have made that would have avoided that. But not as if those are related, in any sense besides time. We have to acknowledge and respect God's sovereignty over everything that happens, but we should also accept the fact that we make decisions that bring bad things about. And I'm not saying that we can change God's perfect plan, but within God's plan, we make decisions that put ourselves in the situations we find ourselves in. So this event forced me to reflect on how I plan things and how I make decisions. Without this event happening, I wouldn't have a reason to reconsider how I do things. And I already said, we can't see the big picture ahead of time because only God knows everything, but we can look back with hindsight and think about what we could have done differently and make those decisions in the future. I will be making an effort not to overschedule myself in the future. Now I have a practical reason to do so. There was a number of things I could have done differently, but that doesn't mean I could have thwarted God's plan. And none of the decisions I made were bad decisions. None of them seemed like the wrong thing to do at the time, and I would probably make some, if not all of those decisions again. But when you look back, you realize, I could have been on time. I could have scheduled better, could have fulfilled my duties and not left early. Those are all things worth thinking about. And don't think that I'm like beating myself up and blaming myself for the car wreck. Like I said, it wasn't my fault. But we shouldn't let any event like this in our lives pass by without having some deep thoughts about it and letting God teach us something through it. God puts these things in our lives for a reason. We don't always know what it is, but we can still learn something, even if we never know it all. But here's something else we should think about. What if God is protecting us from even worse things? What if there was an even worse car accident waiting for me up the road, and I avoided it by being delayed by the one I got in? I could have stayed home and died taking a shower, like in Final Destination, you know? There's no end to the things that could have happened to me if I didn't find myself in the situation God specifically placed me. And again, it's not that his plan is being changed. It's not like his original plan was for me to die in a worse car accident, but for some reason he changed his mind and had me get in the minor car accident, you know? Like what happened was always God's plan, but that doesn't mean that other scenarios don't exist. They just aren't possibilities because you can't change God's plan. They're not possible in that sense. I guess they're possibilities, but not possible in the sense that they're ever going to happen. Of course, God knows everything that could possibly happen, and I'm no Molinist, and if you don't know what that is, don't Google it. We won't be able to stop bad things from happening by making better choices, but God wants us to learn from the things that happen to us. We can look back and try to make better decisions on our own part, but we can't know the possibilities God protected us from. That's just something we have to accept and trust in him. And of course, we can't ignore the fact that good things also happen to us. We shouldn't be asking the question, why do bad things happen? We should be asking, how does anything good happen at all? You know, when you think about it, we're all just sinners trapped on a floating rock, floating through space together. You know, how does anything good come out of that? By God's mercy and grace, obviously. You probably know the youth group definition of mercy and grace, right? Mercy is not getting something bad you deserve, and grace is getting something good that you don't deserve. Well, we don't deserve anything good. So everything good that happens to us results from God's grace to us. A good thing happening to us that we don't deserve. You know, we can listen to great music, have a good cigar, enjoy our families. We can gather with our local churches and worship God together. And we don't deserve any of those things, but God gives them to us nonetheless. And we certainly can't complain if he ever took those things away, because we didn't deserve them in the first place. And since we deserve bad things, the lack of a bad thing happening is his mercy. What we actually deserve is an eternal punishment for our sin. Anything short of that is mercy. And that includes things over the course of our day that he might keep from happening to us. You know, I deserve to get in a car accident every single day. In fact, I deserve a lot worse than that. But every day that God protects me from that, that's mercy. So think about the things that happen to you today, the good and the bad, and thank God for the good things, and reflect on the bad. You know, see what you can learn from it. Think about how much of that bad you brought on yourself, while being fully surrendered to God's sovereignty over that situation. Think about what God might be trying to teach you through the bad, you know, and above all else, cling to him in the bad and seek him in the worst of times. The two things I talked about today are small potatoes compared to what I know some of you are going through, but there's always something to learn, and there's always a reason, and there's always some good in it. And we may never know it, like I said, but it's there, and that should be enough of a comfort to us. And it's always an opportunity to draw closer to God and to learn more about him. So that's going to do it for today. Like I said, kind of a short episode this week. Thank you for listening. I hope I get to see some of you while I'm in California. I guess I should say I hope that I saw some of you while I was in California, because I'll almost be on my way back by the time this comes out. So Lord willing, and the governor feels generous, I'll see some of you there. Take it easy, everybody. I'll talk to you next week.